Section 9, Errors and Exceptions. I'm going to open it in a new tab as usual. On the right here, I'm going to create a new Jupyter notebook and I'm going to name it as 09 Error and Exception Python 3. Rename. The first one, as usual, is going to be overview. Then I got long trace back. Then I got next we're gonna got syntax error, and we're gonna got tabs and space inside syntax error, variable name error, index error, and then file error. We got reading error messages. We got some challenge. We got identifying syntax error. We got identifying variable name errors. We got identifying index errors, and finally we got two key points. So quite a bit. So the trace backs can look intimidating, but they give us a lot of useful information about what went wrong in our program, including where the error occurred and what types of error is worse. An error having to do with the grammar and syntax of the program is called a syntax error. If the issue has to do with how the code is indented, then it will be called an indentation error. A name error will occur when trying to use a variable that does not exist. Possible causes are that a variable definition is missing. A variable reference differs from its definition in spelling or capitalization, or the code contains string that is missing codes around it. Containers like lists and string will generate errors if you try to access items in them do not exist at all. This type of error is called index error. Trying to read a file that does not exist will give an file not found error. Trying to read a file that is open for writing or writing to a file that is open for reading will give an IO error. So I'm going to copy these key points, very useful to review them. Going to the top, change to markdown and paste it. I got it now. So let's get started from the beginning. So as normal, the estimated is 30 minutes, but I guess it's going to be longer. Let's see how it goes. Overview. Every programmer encounters errors, both those who are just beginning and those who have been programming for years. Encountering errors and exceptions can be very frustrating at the times and can make coding feel like a hopeless endeavor. However, understanding what the different types of errors are and when you are likely to encounter them can help a lot. Once you know why you get certain types of errors, they become much easier to fix. Errors in Python have a very specific form. It's called a trace back. So let's examine this code. We got this code, we put in shelf here, we just run it. So we got some command. This code has an intentional error. You can type it directly or use it for reference to understand the error message below. So we define a new function called favorite ice cream. Then inside there we put in ice cream. It's a list and there are 3 items in the list, and then we print out the 4th item. Then we got favorite ice cream. So definitely we got error, and it is an index error. List index is out of range. Why? Because we have only 3 items in the list, but we are referring to the 4th item. So you can see that the error is because of that. So in order to fix the error, we just copy that and we put in one more item for the list. For example, curl chocolate, maybe I like mango, and then we run that and we got mango. So that is the first example. Next is long tracebacks. Sometimes you may see a traceback that is very long. Sometimes it might be even 20 levels deep. So this can be like horrible. It looks like something horrible happened, but the length of the error message doesn't reflect the severity of the error. Rather than it just indicates that your program called many functions before it encounters the error. Most of the time, the actual place where the error occurs is at the bottom most level. So you can just skip down all the traceback to the bottom. So what error did the program actually encounter? So in the last line of the traceback, Python helpfully here tells us the category or the types of error. In this case, it is an index error, and a more details of the error, which is list index out of range, which is really useful. If you encounter an error and you don't know what it means, it is still important to read the traceback closely. That way, if you fix the error but you encounter a new one, you can tell that the error changed. Additionally, sometimes knowing where the error is occur is enough to fix it, even if you don't entirely understand the whole message. If you do encounter an error and you don't recognize it, there is another way to work around, is trying to look at the official documentation on errors. However, note that you may not always be able to find the error there, and it is possible to create custom errors, and in that case, hopefully the custom error message is informative enough to help you to figure out what went wrong. So you can create your custom error message, and it will help you to trace where the error is and why. Next is syntax errors. When you forget a colon at the end of a line, accidentally add one space too many when indenting under an if statement, or you forget a parenthesis, you will absolutely encounter something called syntax error. That means Python couldn't figure out how to read your program. This is similar to like forget punctuation in English. For example, the text is difficult to read because there is no punctuation, there's no capitalization. So it is like very hard because you have to figure out where each sentence starts, where each sentence is ends, and you also have to figure out where each sentence begins. To some extent, it might be ambiguous, and if there should be a sentence break or not. People can typically figure out what is meant by text with no punctuation, but we are much smarter than computers. Computer or a programming language like Python is very rigid. It can only understand the way it's designed to be. So here is an example. We got a function called SumFunction, and we forgot a colon at the end of the line that we defined the function name, and we run it, and we got a invalid syntax. It is at the line 1. So I'm gonna turn on line, so you see that it is at the line 1 here. And it's really useful here that when we see invalid syntax, it also even puts a little arrow there in the place where there is an issue. In this case, the problem is that the function definition is missing a colon at the end, as we mentioned from the beginning. Actually, the function above had two issues with syntax. If we fix the problem with the colon, for example, we see that there is also another syntax called indentation error, which is unexpected indents, and the location is at the return message, line 4. Both syntax error and indentation error indicates that we got a problem with syntax in our program, but an indentation is more specific. When we got an indentation error, that means always that we got the problem with the code is not indented. But syntax error is much more wider error. So we can fix this. Okay, instead of doing that, we can fix the code down there, put the indentation to be consistent with other and run it. So now we can run the function without any error. Next is tabs and spaces. Some indentation errors are harder to spot than the other. In particular, mixing spaces and tabs can be really difficult to spot because they are both white space. In the example below, here we for the first two lines in the body of the function, which is indented with tab. So here's a tab, so here's a tab, and here's another tab. While the third line here, the fourth line actually, which is indented using spaces. So it's clearly here, if you're working with Jupyter Notebook, you can see that. And normally, visually, it is hard, not impossible, but hard to spot the error. We can see here has some issue with that. If we know that, like if you prefer to indent by tabs, you will see this is a problem. But if you prefer to indent with spaces, like I am, so normally before I use spaces for indenting, but now I often using tabs, and this is really not a standard. So I think the standard is spaces actually, because the default editor is spaces, but because I'm working for the company and my boss is using tabs, and all the code he is written in the company library modules and tools are tab indented, and I have to change my editor and I had to code everything in tab, because whenever I try to run my program and I got some issue and I need to fix this and it's not consistent with the code from the library of the company, so I had to change to tab indentation. So I mean, it depends on the environment or the company you work with. If people around you are using spaces indentation, probably you need to go for spaces. So just to be aware of that. So how to fix this? So we can fix it to be consistent, like we can change it all to tab and it's also working, and we can also change it all to spaces and it's also, ooh, it's not working. I'm gonna do it again. Oh, should be one tab there and it's working. So that is a way to fix tabs and spaces. The way is just make it consistent throughout the program, throughout the script that you are running. Next is variable name error. Another very common type of error is called name error. So let's say we print out A, name A is not defined. So that's an error because the variable A is not defined. Or we print out hello and it's called variable hello is not defined. But maybe you intend to print out hello like that, but you forget to put in the quotation mark, and then you got error. We got another example here for number in range 10 and then the count. So we print the count out and we got an error. Count name is not defined because count is a local variable but it's not defined elsewhere. So to fix the problem, we can define the count inside, which is for example 1, and then we print it and we got count is count plus 10 and print the count is that that's very count is 10, which is outside. Okay, so we define the count somewhere. So here actually we got the count. So we got the count in the memory. When we got the count in the memory, we print it out as we're working. But if we don't have the count in memory, will not working. So that's the issue. Or if the count now is equal to like it's a string, and then we run this. it's gonna get an error. But for this case, we define the count again. Because we define the count again, so it's always working. So that is the problem with a variable is not defined. Finally, the third possibility is that you made a typo when you were writing your code. Let's say we fix the error above by adding count is equal 0 before the loop, and frustratingly, this actually does not fix the error. Remember that the variables are case sensitive, so the variable count is different from count. Count is different from capital count, and we still get an error. So let's say try that. Why it's working? Because I got count already. So to make sure it is not working, I think I need to maybe delete the count, and then I'm gonna get the count here. Yeah, I delete the variable count, and then I run it again. So you got error because the variable count is not defined, but you got count here. So to make it run, you need to define it as count case sensitive, and you got the program is running without error. Next is index error. Next up are errors having to do with containers like lists and strings and the items within them. So if you're trying to access an item in a list or a string that doesn't exist, then you will get an error, definitely. It makes sense. If you ask someone what day they would like to get coffee and they answer Saturday, and you might be a bit annoyed. So Python is similar. It's not gonna work if we assign a job that is outside of its capability. Basically, because an element does not exist, so you cannot access that element. That's simple. So we got only 3 elements inside it, like the list, but we want to extract the 4th element, and we got an error called list index out of range. So to fix the error, whether we can add one more element here, and we got it, either by adding element or just change this to be maybe -3. That one way. The other way is we change the index that we are calling, such as -1, and it's also working. Next is file error. The last type of error we will cover today, which is associated with reading and writing files. It is called file not found error. So if you're trying to read a file that does not exist, you will receive an error called file not found error. So it's very clear. If you attempt to write to a file that was open as read-only, Python 3 will return an error called unsupported operational error. More generally, problems with input and output manifest as I/O error or IS error, depending on the version of Python you are using. So here we got an example. We got a variable called file handle. We use function open. We open the text file as read only, and we enter. And we've got an error called file not found error, which is error 2. No such file or directory exists. So the reason for this is that the file that we are trying to open, it's not existed, or the path to the file is not correct. So sometimes we need to put in the path longer, like for example here we are in SWC Python, but the data is put in data. So if we just put in the name of the data file like inflammation -csv, it's not going to work. So we need to put in it is inside data, and it will work for us. A related issue can occur if you use a read flag instead of the write flag. Python will not give you an error if you try to open a file for writing when the file does not exist. However, if you mean to open a file for reading but accidentally open it for writing, and then you're trying to read from it, you will get an unsupported operation error telling you that the file was not open for reading. So here is a good example. We run that. So we got not readable, which is unsupported operation. These are the most common errors with files, though many others exist. If you get an error that you've never seen before, searching for the internet for that kind of error. So often you can find answer like on Stack Overflow or somewhere. Next is reading error messages. Reading the Python code and reading resulting traceback below and answer the following question. So we got a challenge. So we got this code. Just want to try to run it. If we got the same error, okay, we got the same error. So the code here, the question is that how many levels does the traceback have? So we got, how many levels? 1, 2, 3 levels. Okay. What is the function name where the error occurs? The function name the error occurs is print Friday message. Okay. On which line number is the function the error occurs? So the line number 18 here, line number 16, and line number 13. And what is the type of error? What is the type of error we got is a key error type. And what is the error message? Friday. So let's say we see the solution. So which is 3 level, which is print message, print Friday message. Is that print message? Yeah, this is print message, not print Friday, which is print message. And then the location is what? The location is 11. Which one? Is this one? Okay, 11. Not very clear. Key error for me, yeah. Fourth number is the type of error with key error, and the message is there isn't really a message. You're supposed to infer that Friday is not a key message. So Friday is not a key message. Okay. So let's say we got a script like this, and it's got an error. So how to fix it? This is function here. We got a tuple inside, and it's a dictionary with the message there. And we print that out, message and day. And do we get day in there? No, we don't have anything called day there. So the reason why it's not working for day, because we don't have day. Okay, we put in the day, and this is Friday, and the Friday in there. So yeah, so to fix this, we just change Friday, and it should be working. So the reason why, because when we run the function, we put in the day is not as the day defined in the dictionary. So we choose capitalize, it's not working, but we change to F, it's gonna work. That is how to solve the problem. So next is syntax error challenge. So read the code below, and without running it, try to identify what errors are. So I'm gonna copy the code, but without running it, trying to identify. So definitely we got this error, and this is I forget the type of that. Should be syntax error, something like that. Run the code and read the error. It is a syntax error or an indentation error. So it should be a syntax error. Yeah, good. Fix this. It's also a syntax error. There it should be open. Great. Now it is unexpected indentation error. So first fix is that. The second fix is for indentation error, and it's working. But it's intrinsic. It's interesting that the print here is red and the print here is in green. I don't know why. Jupyter Notebook makes that. And see the solution. Fix the error and repeat 2 and 3 until we fix all the error. Okay, we fix all the error, and it should be like that, and all good for us. Next is identifying variable name errors challenge. Read the code below and without running it. Okay, identify what the errors are. So we got for number in range 10, and if number divide remaining if the remainder of this is either 0, we will assign message is message plus a. So we got message is not defined, we got a is also not as well. So the error should be variable name is not defined, something like that, or we can, for exact name is name error. Then run the code and read the error message, which is name error and the number is not defined. Cool. What types of name arrow do you think it is? In other words, is this a string with no quotes, or is it a misspelled variable, or a variable that should has been defined? But yeah, the problem is a variable is not defined. Yeah, number is not defined as well. Many variables were not defined. Fix the arrow. I'm gonna fix. So now we need to fix the arrow. So I'm gonna change there. To fix the arrow, firstly I'm gonna make the number to that one, and the message is not defined. May have message is maybe 1. Now A is not defined. A is 1. I got an error, type error, which is unsupported operand types for int and string. So we got message is as a number, and B is something a string. So to run that, actually I'm fixing the function without understand what the function is trying to do. So actually I need to get a better approach. Firstly, I need to see what is the purpose of this function. Okay, so the purpose of this function is not a function. I mean, it's a code. It's a piece of code, and for a number in a range of that, use if the number is multiple of 3, otherwise use B. Okay, so if the number is fully divided by 3, so we got 0. In other words, if the remainder of this division is 0, and we got message is message plus A, which is here. Okay, and and then we can print now. We can print message here. So we got A, so that's good, it's working. But else we're gonna have message is gonna be B, and B should be a number. Instead of using string here, I got B should be a number, and we didn't even have B, so we need to define B, and we're gonna got that. So we got that, and we print the message. So that means the message is a final return. Actually, this bit of code is not very meaningful, but that I fixed the code and it's running now. So let's see the solution. Copy that, and it is absolutely different one. So here I choose the solution with numbers, but the provided solution is with string and character, and that's interesting. Next is identify index arrows. So we got another challenge. Read the code below, and without running it, try to identify what the arrows are. So I'm gonna copy it and paste in here. So we got a list 4 items, so it should be okay for this list. And I print this out, and I get the 5th item of the list, and definitely I'm gonna get an arrow called the index is out of range. So run the code and read the arrow message. What type of arrow is that? So the list index is out of range, and it's called index arrow. Okay, and fix the arrow. So in order to fix the arrow, which is very simple, one way we just call the 3rd element. The other way we just add one more item, which is spring, summer, fall, winter, and maybe raining. Yep, my favorite season is raining. And that's it for this section, and we come back to the key points, and it's good to review it again this time. So we got traybacks can look intimidating, but they gives us a lot of useful information about what went wrong in our program, including where the error occur, what types of errors was. An error having to do with the grammar or syntax of the program is called a syntax error. The issues has to do with how the code is indented. Then it will be called an indentation error. A name error will occur when trying to use a variable that doesn't exist. Possible causes are that a variable definition is missing, a variable reference differs from its definition in spelling or capitalization, or the code contains a string that is missing codes around it. Containers like lists and strings will generate errors if you are trying to access items in them that do not exist, like this one. And this type of error is index error. Trying to read a file that doesn't exist will give you a file not found error. Trying to read a file that is open for write or writing a file that is open for reading will give you an IO error. So that's it for this section, error and exceptions. I'm gonna close this here. I'm gonna save it in my Jupyter notebook and coming back to that main page. And the next section we're gonna look at defensive programming.